All right, so for this game, we have what is effectively largely a sequencing game. We have kind of these 5 positions to work with. Although, to be honest, it ends up kind of being that the actual sequence, the relative sequence, doesn't matter at all, but we can still set it up the same way. And then for each position, we have to keep track of 2 different things. We essentially have to worry about the pianist who's going to be performing, and we have to worry about kind of the type of piece that they're going to be doing. So we can kind of set it up 2-tiered accordingly. We can set it up as pianist and type for each position. Now, in terms of the elements, we actually don't have too much to work with, which is great. We have W and Z, who are the pianists, and then we have modern or traditional, which are the types of pieces that they will do. And then from there, I guess we can take a look at the rules. First rule tells us that 3 has to be traditional. So I suppose we can kind of plug that right into the board. Next, we are told that exactly 2 of the traditional pieces are going to be done consecutively. Now, that's a very specific and incredibly kind of powerful kind of rule, because if we have to have exactly this kind of TT block, that's worth noting, a 3-position TTT block would not count, right? It would have to be an exactly 2-position block, which means there's no way to place this into 1 and 2, because then that would create a 3 traditional piece block. And there's no way to put that into 4 and 5, because again, it would create a 3-position block. So in order to have a 2-position TT block, it can only really be using this. It would have to go 2 and 3, or it would have to go 3 and 4. And on top of that, it would have to be surrounded by modern pieces, because again, we can't have 3 of them in a row. So we could actually probably exhaust that based on this. There's only 2 major plays, and whichever way you go, you're going to be able to figure out a lot of the type positions. So this should definitely be something that we keep in mind. Anyways, let's keep going for now. Third rule, 4th solo is either WT or ZM. So 4 has to be one of those 2, WT or ZM. Next, we are told that the second is not the same person as the 5th. So pianist number 2 is not the same as the 5th person. And really, since there's only 2 of them, then it means that these 2 are just going to shuffle, which is kind of nice. And lastly, no traditional piece is performed until Wayne does at least 1 modern piece. So essentially, I guess we can say that we are not allowed any T's before we have a WM kind of block. So that's pretty good. In fact, that would mean that the first position, number 1, couldn't possibly be traditional, because if it was traditional, then that would break this rule effectively. So the first one would have to be a modern piece. So that's kind of nice. But anyways, as we said earlier, we can probably exhaust based on this and kind of see where that takes us. So as we said, either the TT block is going to go into 2 and 3, or it's going to go into 3 and 4. And in both scenarios, since we can't have 3 in a row, it would have to be surrounded by M's effectively, which means this is great. On top of that, we know that 4 has to be either WT or ZM, so we actually know exactly what's going to happen there. If this is M, then it's definitely going to be a Z. And if this is a T, then it's definitely going to be a W. So that's awesome. What else can we do here, if anything? Well, actually, wait a minute. We can't have any T's before the first WM. So this would have to be a W then, because if this wasn't a WM, then we wouldn't be able to have any T's. So we would have to have a WM in this scenario. And for this one, I guess you would have to have a W in one of these 2 positions, but it could still go either way. From there, I don't think we can do much more. To be honest, we've taken care of most of the rules. Really, the only thing that's left in play is this rule over here that we haven't fully kind of accounted for, that 2 and 5 are going to have to be different people. But everything else has already been kind of taken care of. So yeah, let's see what we can do. The questions themselves. Question number 19. Now this one's not a standard exclusion question, but as usual, we always do the first question first. So let's go. Which of the following could be all the solos that are traditional? I guess let's take a look. Can we do 1, 3, and no, 1 can never be traditional. 1 is always a modern, so that's out. Next, can we do 2, 3, and 4? And no, it would never be 3 in a row. One of those would have to be modern. Answer choice C, can we do 3 and 4? And maybe in this second template, 3 and 4 could have been the traditional pieces. So C is viable. Just in case though, could we do 3 and 5? And no, because we need that TT block. And E, could we do 4 and 5? And no, because 3 has to be traditional. So the best answer to question number 19 is C. Next, let's take a look at the local question. So the first local here is number 21. So if the pianist who performs the first solo also does the second solo, so if it's the same person in 1 and 2, and I suppose that would have to be the W, wouldn't it? And it's consistent with both of these templates, but we have to have a W among the first 2 positions no matter what. So if 1 and 2 are the same person, it would definitely be W. And I suppose what that would also mean is that since 2 and 5 are not the same, 5 would have to be a Z. So I guess that's something. Let's see what we can do with what we have. The question asks, which of the following would have to be true? And to be honest, we can probably just look for that. Either 1 and 2 would have to be a W, or that Z would have to be 5th. And there it is. Answer choice C gives us that Zara would have to do the 5th solo. Best answer choice to question 21 is C. Next, number 22. If the 5th solo is a traditional piece, now if number 5 is traditional, that would basically lock us into this scenario, and this would have to be a T. And I suppose that's it, really. It doesn't really tell us anything else, because again, this is really the only outstanding rule, and it doesn't tell us who does 2 or 5. So all we know is that this would simply have to be a traditional piece. The question is, for exactly how many of the solos is the choice of pianist determined? And I suppose that would be 2. We would be able to determine Zara over here and W, Wayne, over here. So the best answer choice to question number 22 is 2, or answer choice B. Next, number 23. If the 5th solo Wayne performs is traditional, so if in the 5th solo Wayne does a traditional piece, so again, if we have a WT in number 5, that would just lock that over here. I suppose we can just run that. We can have a WT block here. We would have ZM over here, WM, and these guys would be traditionals. And then we know 2 and 5 are not the same, so this is going to have to be a Z over here. And then number 3 is still ambiguous. The question here is what could be true? I guess let's go. Z1, it cannot. Can we do W2? And no, not at the moment. Can we do Z3? And maybe 3 would be flexible, but just in case, the second solo is modern, definitely not, and the 4th solo is traditional, definitely not. The best answer to question 23 is C. Next, question number 20, the one that we skipped, the one global question. What is the minimum number of solos in which W does a traditional piece? Now, I suppose in this scenario, we had one WT block, and this could have been a Z. So we could have just had a single WT block. So that gets rid of answer choices C, D, and E. But I guess the real question is, could we have done without? Could we have just 0 WT blocks? And I suppose, yeah, because I mean, this was the same template. This was from the first template. Arguably, couldn't this have just as easily been a modern piece? I mean, for the sake of the question, it was a traditional piece, but there's nothing stopping this from being an M. We could have just as easily had an M over here, and that would have worked. So we don't really seem to need to have any WT blocks. So really the answer is 0. Best answer to question number 20 is A.